Campus to Canton. Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Howie Roseman keeps doing this. We're going to get to all that. It's Felix Sharp, Matt Bruning. This is the Campus to Canton show, the pre-draft show, getting you ready for day 2 of the NFL draft. I am sick and tired of watching Howie Roseman just scoop up value when is it going to be my turn as a Lions fan? We've gone through Matt Millen, Bob Quinn, and whomever else. I would trade for Howie Roseman right now. What would you, Matthew, if you had the opportunity, what would you, you're a Cleveland Browns fan. Would you give up 2 first-round draft picks for Howie Roseman?
Yeah, in a heartbeat. Because what am I missing out on? Johnny Manziel and God, who was that cornerback they drafted in that class? He ended up going to the Steelers. Yeah, I know Gilbert. I can't remember what his first or last.
Justin, right?
Yeah, that's right. At Oklahoma State. Yeah, so I'm giving up on Johnny Manziel and Justin Gilbert for 1 year. Big deal. Yeah, I'll take him in a heartbeat.
I like what the Lions did as far as Jahmyr Gibbs because I love the player. But you cannot argue with what the Eagles have done year in and year out. Why do they have the 9th pick overall? They were just in the Super Bowl. I mean, it makes no sense. Austin, you probably feel comfortable being a Steelers fan. You've always had organizational stability. But would you trade for Howie Roseman?
I don't know. I mean, he was pretty close to getting fired like 2 years ago. I think he just all GMs kind of get on those hot streaks, those ebbs and flows. And, I think right now he's just hot.
Are you saying it's luck? Go ahead, say it. Say it on these airwaves that it's luck.
It's kind of like a poker player, right? At some point it's a little bit of luck. If maybe some team just doesn't care and they take Jalen Carter anyway last night and Nolan Smith doesn't, those two things happen independent of anything I would say sharp that necessarily Howie Roseman did. He kind of just sat there and struck when the iron was hot. So I think there is some sort of skill. They obviously had the extra pick in the first place, but yeah, I think at some point there is a little bit of luck involved with all of this.
All right, just go ahead and say it. Just say Howie Roseman is lucky, not good. Say it.
I don't want to say that recording into a microphone anywhere. That'll come back. I'm already backtracking so much stuff from different shows this week. I can't do another one on top of that pile.
I want to get into the best available players here on day 2. Who would be the number 1 overall pick in Dynasty rookie picks? And I want to talk about that Jahmyr Gibbs with a friend of mine, Noah Hills, who is a running back analyst specifically. We're going to talk to that about him. But I think we should just get into, Matthew, the biggest winners and losers from day 1. I want to start with this Eagles team. As I mentioned, they get Jalen Carter at number 9, an interior pass rusher. They're pairing him with Jordan Davis. They're pairing him with Fletcher Cox. They now have Nolan Smith. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. They drafted Nolan Smith with their own pick there at the end of the first. They got Nakobe Dean. They just took like all the key players from this 2021 Georgia defense that gave up like 20 points through the first 5 or 6 games of the season. If you have to look at winners, given what they had already, given the fact that they've already signed Jalen Hurts to a long-term contract, I don't know how you don't begin the conversation with the Eagles, with any other team other than the Eagles when you're talking about winners.
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely just destroyed the draft. This is at least the 3rd year in a row. And the defense, it's interesting. Their team was built on that defense last year. And I think a lot of people forget about that because of how bad it was in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes. But they had a really solid defense all season long. And then they just continue to add these national championship Georgia defenders to it who are all good. I mean, depending on what you think of Nolan Smith, who ended up going, was it 30, right? That they picked him last night, who a lot of people apparently had him projected as like a top 10 player. How he falls that far, I don't understand. Jalen Carter, it's obviously because of some of the off-field stuff to be able to get him as well. Like, this defense is likely going to be one of, if not the best defense in the NFL. And he just continues to kill it. And they locked up Jalen Hurts. He made the trade last year for A.J. Brown to improve that offense. I mean, they have to be, I think, the number one winners of the draft so far. And it's only through round one. He's got multiple picks coming because he also is just a master at making these trades and getting all these extra picks. Like, I legitimately think if Nolan Smith wasn't there, I mean, Austin was just saying there's a little bit of luck to it. I would almost bet you if Nolan Smith wasn't there, he would have traded out of that spot and probably got like a 2024 first for something. And it would have ended up being a bad team. And then he ended up getting like some high-end player in the 2024 draft because he's just been on that kind of a run lately.
It's not fair. It's really not fair. Nolan Smith, by the way, the number one recruit in what, the 2021 class, the number one overall recruit. Austin, who do you got as far as biggest winners on day one of the NFL draft?
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue with Seattle as well. You know, well, time will tell if some of these hit. You know, I don't know. I think people are pretty split on Witherspoon, the Devin Witherspoon that they took with that first pick. You know, was he actually the best corner in the draft? I don't know, but Pete Carroll said that he loved how he conducted himself in interviews and just kind of the physicality that he plays with. Him and Tariq Woolen have a chance to be just an absolute fantastic shutdown corner duo there. And even though I've seen people kind of clamoring the front seven needed a lot of work, if those guys are both as good as they think they're going to be, you don't necessarily need great players on the front seven next season to make that work. You can commit some extra bodies maybe there if you trust some of those guys to keep things locked up on the backside. So I loved that pick. And then obviously Jackson Smith and Jigba later as well. You know, do they need Jackson Smith and Jigba to be amazing right away coming out of Ohio State? No, they don't, because they have Tyler Lockett and they have DK Metcalf. But what do great teams do? They identify the need a year or two before they need it, really, so that when the time comes, they've got the next guy to plug in. Tyler Lockett, over 30, I believe, at this point, doesn't have a ton of years left on that contract. So what do? You go out and grab a guy who maybe isn't exactly the same kind of player, but is still a very dangerous receiver there. And even if he's not, you know, 1,000-yard guy over the next season or two, feel pretty good saying that he probably will be as soon as he steps in for one of those guys in front of him.
Well, the biggest question for Jackson Smith and Jigba was, can he play outside? Oh, he goes to Seattle. He's got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside. He can play the same position that he played Ohio State and stick to that slot while he develops the other portions of his game. So I thought that was a really good landing spot. I tell you who else is a winner. It's Lamar Jackson. He gets a $260 million 5-year contract, 185 guaranteed. Not only that, but remember when this Ravens team drafted offensive linemen, defense in the first round? The last couple of years, they get Rashad Bateman, and this season, they get Zay Flowers. In addition to Mark Andrews and having signed Odell Beckham Jr. I think for those who obviously didn't watch Boston College, Matthew, they don't know that Zay Jones is one of these quick twitch, make you look silly after the catch wide receivers. And he has been productive since he was a true freshman, has been the focal point of that passing game since he was a true freshman. And by the way, if you're playing in Campus2Canton leagues, you're welcome, because he was a value. Now he's a first-round NFL draft pick. Matthew, the Ravens are trying to build this team offensively, which is not something that they've done historically.
Yeah, the Zay Flowers pick was interesting to me, and I wonder if they would have gone a different wide receiver had someone taken Flowers earlier. Like, I wonder if this was their plan all along, to take another wide receiver to pair with Lamar. I mean, you talk about what they've been doing. There are also reports that Antonio Brown's coming out of retirement to go play with the Ravens. I saw the picture of that. I know there were some notifications that went out. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, because we've seen what Monken has been able to do, not just in the NFL with Tampa Bay. Cleveland, actually one of their best offensive years over the past 3 or 4 years, was a year that Todd Monken was there. It was also one of Baker Mayfield's best years. We also saw what he was able to do in Georgia. We know Mark Andrews is going to be a stud for them, but will he be able to get Lamar to throw the ball 600 times? And my question is, what does Zay Flowers do for them fantasy-wise? I love the pick for them from the NFL perspective. I don't know that he's going to be a big fantasy guy, but I mean, they're clearly building this team around Lamar for what feels like the first time since he's been there, because they've drafted nothing but tight ends in the first round. And as you mentioned, offensive, defensive players, they've never really gone out and got him this many pass catchers. All of a sudden, he's got an incredible room around him. That he gets a new contract. Like, I think it's wheels up for Baltimore, which it kind of sucks as a Browns fan. I was really kind of hoping they were going to fumble the bag on this one and let Lamar go somewhere else and then try and roll with Tyler Huntley and draft somebody. But it's great for Lamar Jackson.
Austin, you are a Steelers fan, and you're not afraid to express some skepticism. We haven't seen Lamar Jackson healthy in the last few years. Is he still a top 5-ish quarterback in your opinion? And or do you think of him differently given that he has all of these weapons surrounding him now?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because they haven't done it. He's really relied on one or two guys over the course of his career, and they've really kind of taken the ball out of his hand in key moments. He's not favored particularly well against the Steelers in his career, so he's not a guy that's generally struck fear in my heart. But I do think overall, he's a top 5, 7, somewhere in that range quarterback, probably in the NFL because of obviously what he gives you with his legs. I will say as a Steelers fan, when they made that Zay Flowers pick, man, I had the biggest smile on my face. I think the value is terrible there. I don't know what Zay Flowers really adds to this team that they don't already potentially have. And quite frankly, as a guy that I don't hate Zay Flowers by any stretch, but I definitely don't think he was a top 5 receiver in this class. I'm so grateful that this was the guy that the Ravens ended up choosing because I didn't want Zay Flowers anyway. So now I can avoid that bullet. I don't have to worry about that at all. I'll let some other sucker go get that one.
Austin is hating. By the way, Tyler, we should have a sound that says that's cap because I don't think Antonio Brown is coming out of retirement to play for anybody. Let's get to losers here. And my first consideration was potentially the Houston Texans. They get CJ Stroud with their number 2 pick overall, but then they trade up to number 3, giving up number 12. They give up the number 33 pick overall. They give up a 2024 first and a 2024 third to come up and get Will Anderson. I think this is a great trade if Will Anderson is a Myles Garrett level pass rusher. If he is, somebody like that, he is a really good, solid player. But we have to consider, Austin, that 1, Houston's still going to suck next year. And 2, Myles Garrett, Will Anderson might not be like a Joey Bosa level pass rusher. Do you consider the Texans winners or losers from day one?
Yeah, I didn't think it was because I initially thought that it was the Browns pick that they have next year. And that was kind of the rumor that was circulating online was that, oh, no, don't worry. It's the Browns pick. Now, obviously, I think most people think the Browns pick will probably be later than the Texans. And then when it came out that it actually was the Texans pick, that's when I started to get pretty concerned overall. You're thinking about a team that doesn't really have a lot of strong weapons for Stroud. So I'm not sure how well he performs this year. I like Will Anderson a lot. I really, really do. I think he's one of the first shows we did on here was, is Will Anderson a Heisman, guy? Like, is he the second best or the best player in that draft class overall? And I think just because his last year he didn't improve statistically, people have kind of forgotten the guy that he is. I do think he's a great player. I think it was a little rich for a guy that has never played in the NFL to give up 2 firsts, basically, the first pick essentially of what would normally be the second round, and then another 3rd round pick. That seems like a lot to me. But I think, as stupid of an answer as this sounds, I'm willing to withhold judgment because if Stroud ends up becoming a starting quarterback for them, he gets a second contract and is a pretty good player, and Will Anderson ends up being a 10+ sack guy, I think you're okay with those moves. I'm just not sure if they move the needle a ton in the long run with how the rest of that roster is.
Yeah, I don't want to, sit on the side of the fence I don't even know what I was going to say, but sit on the fence about the trade. We need to wait before we can make the judgment on that trade. D'Amico Ryans has always had that really great presence edge rusher, right? I mean, he's had the Bosas in who did he have in San Francisco? Why am I forgetting which Bosa?
Is
was
it
there?
Joey? Is it Joey or Nick?
No, Joey was in the
Okay.
Chargers. Nick
Yeah.
was with the San Francisco 49ers. I think he wanted that defensive player. It sounds like the front office wanted CJ Stroud. So I feel like they made some kind of deals like, hey, if we take CJ Stroud here, I want to trade up and get Will Anderson. That's the typical kind of trade you have to make when you're moving up from 6 to 3. You have to give up 2 first-round picks. Now, typically you see teams do that for a quarterback. But if Will Anderson ends up being their main defensive guy, a guy that will cause all kinds of havoc, and CJ Stroud's their franchise quarterback, this is a great trade. I don't love it because they gave up the 2024 first, because as you just mentioned, Austin, like CJ Stroud does not have any help. And this is the one spot I did not want him to go out of all the teams at the top, because that offensive line is not good as well. And that's kind of the one knock on CJ, right? Is he does not thrive out of structure, and he does not play well out of structure off platform. That's why I was hoping Bryce would go to Houston. So I do think Stroud could struggle a little bit, but I think you just have to withhold judgment right now. I mean, if they end up, I know they gave up one of their second round picks. They still have a pick today. If they end up getting him a wide receiver, there's some interesting guys left. And if they get him a wide receiver next year and he ends up playing fine, like this is going to be a slam dunk for him. I think people just jumped on him a little bit too much because you don't see these guys really trade it for an edge rusher that's not named Myles Garrett, Joey Bosa, Chase Young, and everybody's kind of, I think, down on Will Anderson because of the year that he had this year.
And Will Anderson is a little bit smaller than all of those guys, to be fair. Matthew, I mean, you've got a Garrett Wilson and Justin Fields jersey behind you there. Did the cognitive test change your opinion at all of CJ Stroud? Because I had CJ Stroud as my quarterback one for just a little while, but did it change your opinion?
No, I mean, so coming into the year, Bryce Young was my QB1. The test didn't change that. Now, actually, I hate admitting this live on air, but like as we move through the season, despite what many may think, I've actually been Anthony Richardson's biggest supporter out of everybody over at Campus2Canton, as Colin Decker mentioned on our draft coverage last night. And Anthony Richardson had actually jumped him recently and was my QB2. So no, this doesn't change anything for me. And the S2 test doesn't change anything. Like, say what you want about him scoring an 18%. We've seen a lot of people come out and say like that can be kind of taken out of context and it depends on the school and everything. And we just seen him play really well. I'm more worried about things I've seen on the field than any kind of test that we've seen, because I'm also going to be honest, Will Levis scored like a 80-something%, and we all said he was not going in the first round. So if he can score an 80-something, I'm still taking CJ Stroud over him every day of the week.
Apparently everyone is lying today because Matthew's talking about being Anthony Richardson's biggest supporter. So Tyler, we're going to need that sounder ASAP if this is going to go at the rate that it's going today. That's cap too. That is cap also, Mr. Bruning. I want to get into surprises and surprises on day one. Austin, as a company, Campus2Canton has been, no matter what anybody said, no matter what the mock draft said, no matter what Ian Rappaport was saying, no matter if Will Levis was supposedly had a 92% chance of going into the top 10, we have always said, no, it's not. We've had show bets. We had tattoo bets. Bet on him coming, falling out of the first round. We've gone on multiple podcasts saying that he's not a first round. You had a charity bet with somebody saying he's going to fall out of the first round. Why did Will Levis fall out of the first round when he was supposed to be a lock to go QB, number 2 overall?
Yeah, I don't want to speculate about the things that we have no access to. Things like how he interviewed, although I suspect that he's a weird guy. And I think depending on who you talk to, you might not really vibe with him. So I want to leave all of those things out. If we're just talking about his play, I think it's tough to take a guy early who was as bad as he was his final year in school. You could talk about the year before, his 4th year in school, since I think last year was his 5th year, and I don't know what to call anything anymore because everyone has all these extra years just floating around. But the year before, he was good. But people want to compare it to like Justin Herbert's year before he was a senior, where he kind of had the really big junior year and then senior year wasn't great. Justin Herbert's junior year was still significantly better by basically every metric than Will Levis's was. Levis's good year was like Herbert's bad year, essentially. The expectations are just not equivalent there at all. I think Levis is a guy that throws a ton of interceptions and puts the ball in harm's way too often. He does not have a ton of great pocket feel at this point. I'm not sure that's something that you can really fix. I think you either kind of feel those ghosts or you don't. And, I just think overall he's got that big arm, and that's kind of what he's really leaning on right now. But, how many NFL quarterbacks have we seen have a big arm and try to lean on that? You need a lot more than a big arm. I'm still, I'm not rooting against him, although I have to say, obviously, for my reputation's sake, I can't say that I'm upset that he fell a little bit, but I'm still, not rooting against him, and there's still a chance that he could be fine. But I know I think the NFL realized what most people that watch college football regularly realized.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about a pre-show, right? Everybody talks about Will Levis being this great player when they talk about him, always say, well, he's got elite arm strength. Like, that's all. I'll be conservative and say 85% of the NFL has elite arm strength. Like, that's not anything special. Like, you have to be able to actually play and show nuances of the quarterback position. Austin mentioned his uncomfortableness in the pocket, and I don't even want to blame him for last year because he did have that toe injury. He wasn't as mobile, but still, you go back to the year prior, like, he was making bad throws. He's late on a lot of things, and I use one throw in particular this past year. You go a very highly publicized game, that game against Tennessee where they got blown out. There was a play in the third quarter where he was playing again with supposedly, quote unquote, no weapons, even though I think Alabama last year would have taken Dane Key and Barian Brown on their team, and they probably both would have been starting for Alabama every single week. Barian Brown was playing against Tennessee's corner on the left side of the field, burned him. He was past him as soon as Will Levis said hut. Completely clean pocket. There was nobody in front of Will Levis. Barian Brown had 3 yards of separation, and Will Levis chucks it and tries to give it to him back shoulder instead of just leading Barian Brown, and literally throws it right to the Tennessee defender for an interception. Like, and that's who Will Levis is, but people fall in love with the big plays and the big throws and the fact that he was semi-mobile last year, and they say he's it. And I think the NFL has shown us, they showed us this last year, and I know we talked a lot about it, not on this show, but on all our stuff. Will they do it again this year and show us that they're really trying to find guys that can come in and play in the NFL now? They're tired of taking these guys in the first round that are projects and hoping they pan out. And I think they are showing us that they're doing that because they did it again this year with Hendon Hooker and Will Levis.
Not a surprise to us. If you're box score scouting from last year, not this year, but the previous year, Wan'Dale Robinson did a lot for Will Levis's profile because they ran a lot of bubble screens throwing behind the line of scrimmage, and Wan'Dale Robinson would run and make a play. Even plays down the field, Wan'Dale Robinson would get Will Levis out of trouble. You mentioned him missing high in that Tennessee game. That's a thing for him. Like, he misses high and overthrows wide receivers who are wide open. You cannot do that. You cannot do that because you're going to turn the ball over, and Will Levis turns the ball over, fumbling the ball. He throws pick sixes. He does like everything that you could do. Other than, arm strength, being able to look good throwing the ball on his knees or in shorts, I don't know that he possesses any more attributes that would lead me to believe that he's a first round or franchise level quarterback. I just don't see that, and we've all believed that. So it was not a surprise for us that he fell out of the first round. According to ESPN, there was a 92% chance that Will Levis would go top 10. Where are these numbers coming from? Where are they coming from? Because it's not coming from front offices. Oh, yeah, we're going to take Will Levis number 2. I don't think that anybody's doing that. So where is that number coming from? I want to bring in another, speaking of surprise. So Will Levis falling out of the first round, not a surprise to us. Jahmyr Gibbs going number 12 overall was a little bit of a surprise. I want to bring in a friend of mine, Noah Hills, at Noah More Parties on Twitter. Noah is an RB specialist, a writer. He has expressed some skepticism about Gibbs. Before we get to that analysis, Noah, I want to ask you, were you surprised that Jahmyr Gibbs went 12th overall?
Absolutely. Probably other than the trade up to number 3, I think, by the Texans, that was the biggest surprise of the draft to me. It was not a need for the Lions. We've heard this stuff about, they said the Jets were going to take him at 15 if he hadn't gone at 12. They have Breece Hall. Like, I don't know if that's true. It just seems like, inventing things to justify the pick. But yeah, it wasn't a need. They were a good offense regardless. He's going to be a good and effective player for them, but it was just a strange pick, and not one that I expected at all, especially given the presence of DeAndre Swift, who I think they're likely, especially given the Gibbs pick, probably clearly frustrated with and maybe even done with Swift. But those players fill similar, they're similar archetypes, fill similar roles on the field. So it was a little bizarre.
You can find Noah's work at NoahMoreParties.com. You can find him on Twitter at the same name, Noah studies running backs, analyzes the running back position. Noah, you have expressed skepticism about Gibbs, not as a player overall, not as a pass catcher, but as a rusher. Talk to me a little bit about that skepticism.
Yeah, I think most of that skepticism comes from his rushing efficiency numbers in college, where he just wasn't consistently adding value relative to like the other guys, even at Georgia Tech. Going back to Georgia Tech, like Jordan Mason was a more effective player on a per carry basis while they intersected at Georgia Tech. Similar things with the other backs at Alabama, and to the degree that Gibbs was adding value on the field above and beyond what those guys were adding, it wasn't impressive relative to what other, successful high-end NFL prospects add. And so, kind of this sentiment that he's like an Alvin Kamara type or a Dalvin Cook type player or even an Aaron Jones type player kind of never jived with me outside of his contributions in the passing game. I think he's, I don't think he's a deficient runner. He's not very powerful, but I think he's a sound decision maker. But he's going to be excellent in the passing game for them. I just don't know that he's going to be, a high end runner of the football in the NFL. Though I don't know that the Lions necessarily need him to do that.
Well, I mean, he lands with Detroit. They might have one of the 5 best offensive run blocking offensive lines in the NFL. Does his landing spot change your opinion at all as to what he can be as a rusher?
As a runner, not really. I think positional value and what it cost them to acquire him, set aside. I think I understand what they're trying to do in the backfield here. I think David Montgomery adds more value in the passing game than Jamal Williams did. I think Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't have the sort of, bailing on structure and bouncing everything to the outside kind of tendencies that DeAndre Swift has that have made him a frustrating player to, root for in fantasy or, to be part of, the Lions fandom. And so I think he's probably a little bit more reliable there. And so, pairing those two guys together will give them a little bit more, versatility, and will make them less predictable with their personnel in the backfield, I think. Where with Williams, it was, they're obviously just running the ball. And with Swift, they're obviously just throwing the ball. And I think Gibbs and Montgomery bring them, closer to some sort of equilibrium there. But as far as Gibbs's potential to be effective in the NFL as a ball carrier, I think the landing spot helps given that the offensive line is good. But they lean slightly gap heavy there in Detroit, or at least they have in the last couple of years. I think we would ideally prefer a little bit more outside zone for Gibbs, and maybe Ben Johnson, adds that to the offense a little bit more to accommodate Gibbs. But as a pass catcher, I anticipate this being a great fit. He fits 1 for 1 in the role that Swift had, being able to run those like high value, advanced routes downfield. He's going to smash there with a quarterback who has a propensity to check down to Jared Goff, and an offensive coordinator who's shown the ability and a willingness to like scheme guys up in the passing game, like DeAndre Swift. Even though he was frustrating and kind of disappointing these last couple of years, Gibbs can step into that role and be better.
I want you to know that I am personally offended because 1, you've defamed my Detroit Lions, and 2, you've defended one of my favorite players in Jahmyr Gibbs. So I'm personally offended and triggered. But Noah, you do study the running back position. Are there any particular players that you believe are fits for day 2 that you're looking for, running backs in general that you're looking forward to seeing being selected here on day 2?
Yeah, I've got a couple guys. I think Tampa Bay took the most top 30 visits with running backs of any team in this class. So I would look out for them taking a running back. Maybe not today, maybe tomorrow, round 4, round 5. But I like Roschon Johnson there, maybe Zach Charbonnet, some guy, like they just need somebody there who can run the ball effectively. Like Leonard Fournette wasn't it. Rashad White is probably not it. Just get somebody in Tampa Bay who can run the ball and not screw things up behind the line of scrimmage. And then one that I've been really thinking about lately is Dallas and Zach Evans. Dallas picks at, I believe, 58 and at 90 today. They're, leans slightly zone heavy. I think that suits Evans well. But that they also just feel like a spot where a kid like Zach Evans, who has these sort of like nebulous character concerns that people are worried about, where like Dallas seems like a place where those guys go to get right and get accepted. Zach Evans feels like a Jerry Jones type kid. Pairing him with Tony Pollard would allow him to just run the ball. I think he could be really effective there. And then the Miami Dolphins, I would love Devon A-Chain to land with the Miami Dolphins. I think that's the ideal spot for him. Add him to the speed they already have there in that outside zone heavy scheme. Let Tua Tagovailoa throw him some swing passes and let him, make things happen in the open field. And then Tyjae Spears with the New Orleans Saints. They pick at 40. That might be a little bit too early, but 71. They also have a pick. He could step in with Alvin Kamara and his kind of disciplinary / legal situation, and be this a similar type of guy in the way that they're able to utilize their running backs in his absence and maybe after he's done with the team. I think Spears would be really interesting, especially with a check down quarterback with Derek Carr there in New Orleans.
Despite him defaming my Detroit Lions in the Jahmyr Gibbs pick, you should still check out Noah's work at Noah More Parties on Twitter and at NoahMoreParties.com. Check out his work on running backs. Noah, we thank you. We appreciate you joining us today. We are going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to see who is the 101 in Dynasty Rookie Drafts and who are the best day 2 players overall. It's the Campus to Canton show. This is Better Sports Network.
NFL Draft is now officially open.
Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm present the 2023 NFL Draft Bettercast, covering the fantasy football and sports betting angles of the NFL Draft.
Are you ready? Let's get it started.
Rookie scouting reports, NFL player comparisons, instant projections, draft props, and live betting. Live reports from Fantasy Alarm's Britt Flynn in Kansas City. Follow the NFL Draft and play our live Q&A contest for your chance to win fabulous prizes.
With the first pick,
This is the 2023 NFL Draft Bettercast on Fantasy Alarm and Better Sports Network.
Not a fan. Not a fan. If we had another break, I'd ask for different rejoin music. This is the Campus Canton show on Better Sports Network. This is the Campus Canton show. We are getting you ready for day 2 of the NFL Draft here. The Better Sports Network app has the best NFL Draft experience you're going to find. Join us tonight to follow all the picks, chat with fans, and play our live draft game. Get instant fantasy football and betting analysis as the picks are announced. Answer predictive questions and compete for your chance to win a one-of-one Brock Purdy augmented reality trading card. Download the Better Sports Network app for free right now in the Apple Pay app and Google Play stores. Matthew, I went to public school. I don't read.
Reading's hard for you. Yeah.
I don't read shit all the time. I want to continue this conversation just a little bit on Jahmyr Gibbs. I think 12 into the Detroit Lions was not expected, but I personally believe that he belonged in a similar conversation to Bijan Robinson, who went number 8 to the Falcons. Austin, do you agree? Was Jahmyr Gibbs a first round and even top 15 running back talent in your opinion, despite what Noah has to say?
I think top 15 is probably rich for me. Top 15 is probably rich for me on pretty much any running back, even my love for Bijan Robinson. I don't know that I would necessarily advocate for taking him there unless you're an Eagles situation where you lucked into a pick there. I don't think he's on the same level of player as Bijan Robinson. I just don't know that Jahmyr Gibbs will ever singularly occupy a backfield in the same way that Bijan Robinson will. I think the days of 80% of touches are completely gone in the NFL. But do we even really think that Jahmyr Gibbs can ever be a 60% of touches in a backfield guy? Or I don't see that. Whereas I think Bijan can be a 60, 65%, 5 to 7 targets a game kind of guy. You use him in the red zone. He's got extra utility there. I think that Bijan just has a lot of, if we're talking fantasy, I think he's got a lot of things still that Jahmyr Gibbs really can't bring you, even though Gibbs is such an excellent receiver.
Well, that's the thing about the pick is that the Lions went running back at number 12. They traded back. They got pick 34 overall, but they were there. If they wanted a running back, they could have taken Bijan Robinson at number 6. So, I mean, Matthew, would you rather have Bijan Robinson and know that you would not have that second round pick, or Jahmyr Gibbs in the second?
I mean, if I'm being honest, I'd rather take the side of the deal that they got, because you do get the extra second. And I imagine they're going to get a player today. But if I really would want Bijan over Jahmyr Gibbs, I think that Gibbs is actually going to be really good for Detroit. You wouldn't want Bijan over Jahmyr?
You just said you wanted both things. That's what I'm like.
Well, no, I said, yeah, at the end of the day, I would rather have Bijan Robinson. I'm not going to lie, but I would take the deal that Detroit got. If you're telling me you're going to get another pick, I do not think that for what Gibbs will do in that system, we will see a massive drop-off for what we care about in fantasy between the two of them. I think both got great landing spots. I think, Noah talked a little bit about the way that he thinks that he can succeed in Detroit, and I think that he will be very good. A lot of Detroit's coaching staff has come from New Orleans, who dealt with Alvin Kamara, who saw the way that they used him, and I think they could use Jahmyr Gibbs in that same way. Ben Johnson's a very good offensive coordinator. I don't think they're going to ask Jahmyr Gibbs to carry the ball 15, 20 times a game and then get 3 or 4 catches. I think they're going to ask him to carry the ball 9 or 10 times, and they're going to give him 6, 7, 8 catches, and they're going to kind of give him these touches in areas of the field that matter. They'll use David Montgomery to pound the ball up the middle of the field when they need 2 yards, and then they're going to allow Jahmyr Gibbs to get into space and use his explosive playmaking. The one thing with Jared Goff, he was the worst quarterback in yards per attempt last year. As good a season as he had, he was not chucking the ball down the field. No, I'm telling you, I'm saying this for one reason. He was also a guy who is not afraid to check the ball down. And I think that is going to be massive for Jahmyr Gibbs. If you look at Ben Johnson's system, he is very much a guy who will get the ball to the running backs, and he's very much a, short, and then go deep kind of play. If you actually get Jahmyr Gibbs on these wheel routes, like you've talked about wanting, you wanted Bill O'Brien to do in Alabama and everything, like the way they've used Alvin Kamara in New Orleans at times, I think Jahmyr Gibbs could have an amazing fantasy season. So I do not think the drop-off at the end of the day will be that massive between Bijan, what he does in Atlanta, and what Jahmyr Gibbs ends up doing in Detroit. I like the pick. I did not hate it.
It's all well and good to predict, he only gets 8 to 10 carries a game, but then he's getting 6, 7, 8 receptions a game to kind of sound like it's going to equal the touch playing field here. But if we're talking about some of the elite receiving backs for the past decade, none of them have gotten close to 6 receptions per game. Like Alvin Kamara's best season is 83 catches. He had 3 others that were right at 80 or 81, I believe. So, and Aaron Jones's best season is like 57, 58 catches. So I think it's a lot to kind of say, he's only going to get 8 touches on the ground, but he's going to get these high value 8 other ones every single week that'll make up the ground. I mean, I just don't think we expect Bijan to probably get 4 or 5 targets every single game. I would guess. I'm not saying catches, I'm saying targets. I think he'll probably be close to that range. Plus, you're going to get 20 carries on the ground with him. Like, I just think the gulf there between touches is going to be way too much. I'd say maybe 3 or 4 receptions in his rookie season per game would be a great season for a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs.
So I disagree. I don't think Bijan's getting 20 carries a game. I don't. Okay. I know people say that with Arthur Smith. The only running back he's ever done that with is Derrick Henry. Anytime Derrick Henry's not been there, he has not had let me finish. When he's not had a running back of Derrick Henry's level, he has not given him that. It's been split out. I don't think Bijan's getting 20 carries a game. I don't. I just don't see him coming in and being this guy who's going to get 20 carries a game and then 4 or 5 catches as well. And I'm not saying that Gibbs is going to get 8 catches a game. What I think they're going to do is they're going to use him the way the Saints used Alvin Kamara, and they're going to put him in situations to get him the ball in space. I'm not expecting him to get 8 touches a game. But I also don't think that David Montgomery, I think it's going to be closer to a probably 60-40 split. but Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get these touches that matter for you in fantasy. I don't think they're going to run him up the middle like they would David Montgomery.
I'm making a face because you said Arthur Smith hasn't done that with a running back except for Derrick Henry. I think Bijan Robinson is on Derrick Henry's level as far as being a running back. I also
was
looked
insulting to Bijan
He is
Robinson.
a prospect, but I don't know that he's going to give him those carries. Like I just don't think they're going to give him the ball and say just run up the middle and fucking just bash your brains in against the defense. They're just not going to.
I will say this. Arthur Smith does not care about draft capital. He is going to run what he runs because he hasn't used Kyle Pitts the way we thought he was. Austin, comment in the chat. How high would you draft Jahmyr Gibbs in a best ball league next week?
I play zero best ball, so I would be pulling any number that I'd be pulling here out of my butt. But I do remember on the draft cast last night, Kevin Tompkins was on there and they were talking about it. He was saying that he's been seeing him go like 9th, 10th round. And I think that's pretty late for the upside. I think that the upside with him, especially in the best ball, is going to be that if Montgomery goes down with an injury for a couple games and maybe we get it. I'm not saying we get a couple weeks of like bell cow Jahmyr Gibbs, but even if you just hand him, 3 to 5 more touches a game in those handful of games where he's out, you might get some really nice boom weeks out of him. So I think a little earlier than that, but I don't know that I'd be investing a ton in him here in his rookie season. I think the best for him will be in the future.
Not to make this a Lions-centric show, but Twitter was, talking about the Lions this morning and the fact that they didn't get great positional value with their 2 picks. They take Jahmyr Gibbs at number 12, and then they take Jack Campbell at 18. I was on the show yesterday. I was on the draft cast yesterday. I was not a fan of the Jack Campbell pick. He's a linebacker from Iowa who's going to be great at stopping the run, but who are you trying to stop from running the football anymore? I mean, it's not like we're going to play the Ravens or, San Francisco 2 times a year. Like it's an old school running back that they drafted to play a new school game. I just don't. Oh, man, that one really, really hurt. They could use an edge rusher. They could use an interior defensive lineman. They could have stayed at 6 and gotten Jalen Carter. I mean, Matthew, considering Gibbs and Jack Campbell, give me a grade for the Lions draft yesterday.
Well, I mean, I actually didn't mind the Gibbs pick, but so I'll just say a B because our NFL draft guy in Barnabas Lee, who I think is incredibly smart, loves Jack Campbell. I believe he has him as like his I think he actually has him as his number 1 linebacker in the draft class. So I will be honest, I don't know that much about, like I watched Campbell play when Ohio State played Iowa. I was not going and watching a lot of Iowa games the past couple of years. So I don't really remember exactly how great he has been, but Barnabas loves this guy and that dude is smarter than anybody I know. So I would give him a B. I think it was a great day for Detroit.
In fairness, I'm not asking you to analyze the player specifically, but Austin, it feels like what you get from Jack Campbell, if he's as good as he can be, that's like getting, a great center. Like how much does that change the dynamic of your team if you have a linebacker who's great at stopping the run?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be. I'll give him like a C-. I think because there's still a chance that both players they took end up being really good players for them in the grand scheme of things for their position. But yeah, I mean, I think the positional value thing is kind of been beaten to death at this point. But he probably has to be a borderline Hall of Fame kind of guy for that pick to really have paid off, right? For some of the guys that they passed up at more valuable positions. And Gibbs, I don't know that I would necessarily expect that kind of ceiling out of him, but I think he has to stick around there and be a pretty major piece of their offense for the next couple of years to make that pick worth it as well.
Yeah, Jack Campbell, a 5th-year senior. He had 125 tackles last season in his 5th year. And the year prior, I think he had like 145. So this is a guy, and that's in college where they're only 12 games. So that is a lot of tackles for a player only playing 12 games. But again, you're talking about a guy who's probably going to come out on 3rd down, and they're going to bring in another corner to guard the tight end.
He's not that bad in zone coverage. He's not that bad. He played pretty well in coverage against Ohio State, and I can remember specifically watching that game because Iowa hung around at the very beginning. But I think if you're expecting him to match up with the tight end in any sort of capacity and sort of any sort of man-to-man scenario, I think you're asking for trouble. And that's where the value is completely off. Like you're talking about a guy like Luke Kuechly. You could do that kind of stuff with him. You could have him play zone, and you could have him drop basically to where the safeties are playing and kind of cover, even if he's not necessarily manned up on the tight end, he kind of could cover those kind of routes. I don't think that Campbell quite has that level of athletic ability where you can ask him to do some of those same things. So he is still limited. Even though I think he's okay in zone and he's not like a liability there.
Which is not great because they've got two really good tight ends possibly in TJ Hawkinson and Cole Kmet in that division. I don't think
you lost me
really
at Kmet.
got one. He's
He
going to be more athletic than Jack Campbell.
And we traded away TJ Hawkinson. So, all right, I want to get to the fantasy angle here because, people are going to have their dynasty rookie drafts. We had Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, all taken in the first round. Jackson Smith-Njigba is probably the wide receiver 3 on his team. You've got Zay Flowers, who, if I remember correctly, Lamar Jackson has never had a 1,000-yard receiver. Like even going back to his time in college.
If you don't count Mark Andrews, that is correct. Yes.
Yeah, if you don't count Mark, somebody playing outside of the numbers, outside of that, has never had a 1,000-yard receiver. Quentin Johnston gets Justin Herbert. I think, Matthew, when I'm looking at who's the wide receiver 1 in this class, I might be leaning towards Quentin Johnston.
I'm going to ride the fence on this answer. So it really depends on what you're looking for. I still think Jordan Addison has a very safe floor because of where he landed. In Minnesota, in that Kevin O'Connell offense, I know he's never going to be the one because Justin Jefferson is arguably the best wide receiver in all of football. But Jordan Addison will get peppered with targets. But if you really want to go pure upside, I do think it's Quentin Johnston. We've talked about if this dude can put it all together, he's got the size, speed that nobody else in this class has, and he is paired to Justin Herbert. Mike Williams just unfortunately hasn't been it due to the injuries. I mean, he had that back injury coming into the NFL and really has just struggled. And Keenan Allen can be cut next year. I think it's for like $2 million, and I would not be surprised if they let him go. So you're talking about a wide receiver who could put it all together paired with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I do think that if you want to make the argument for Quentin Johnston at 1, that's fine. I'm still taking
so you're going to come on the radio and like sit on the fence game.
Do you want me to tell you who my wide receiver 1 is?
I want you to be bold.
That. You asked me.
I want you to be bold.
It's still JSN. The landing spot was none of them got any kind of discernitive draft capital. They literally went back to back to back to back. I'll tell you it's not Zay Flowers, and it's still a JSN. He was my number 1 coming in. I still think he's got more talent. Tyler Lockett will be gone, I think, from Seattle next year. The contract just doesn't make any sense. He's getting older. You're right. We haven't seen him play outside, but I think he can go outside and play that Tyler Lockett role. We've seen how phenomenal that has been for Seattle. And if not, he's in the slot, and I think he'll get better matchups because of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside. I'm a little worried about the bet that some of us made that he'll get 2,000 yards in his first 2 seasons here because being the third option in Seattle is not great. He's a phenomenal player, and I think he's going to smash in Seattle. They wanted him. They took him. He's still my wide receiver 1.
See, we're in the soundbite. I got a soundbite from you. It is not Zay Flowers.
You didn't ask. That's all I wanted. You didn't ask who my wide receiver 1 is. You asked, is it Quentin Johnston? So I
just didn't think that you were going to come in him and Han. Well, it's whoever.
Come on,
you
counselor.
Want it to be.
You know the question is the real driver here. Come on.
Yeah. Well, give me yours, Austin. Who is the wide receiver 1? Who should be the wide receiver 1 in this class?
It's JSN, and I think if we're just talking about like a fantasy point finish this year, I bet he is not the wide receiver 3 on Seattle. I think he'll finish as like the second guy this year. And I think they'll all finish bunched relatively closely. But here's the thing. I think Geno Smith is going to love this guy. Geno Smith he might finish the season with the most targets on that team. Like I just think Geno's going to love him as a safety blanket. Geno's kind of not afraid to not really put the ball in harm's way, but really test some of those windows. We saw it a lot last year. And I think that's an area where JSN really excels. And I think obviously operating in the middle of the field, he's going to be in some of those situations a little more often. I really think he's going to have an excellent year. And I think, he might never finish as the wide receiver 1 for a particular season, but I just think the year in value where you know what you're going to get with him is going to be so good there with Seattle.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but in Quentin Johnston, you have like the prototypical X build. He's got speed. He can run after the catch, and maybe he develops that a little bit more of that downfield playmaking ability that, quite frankly, we saw in that Oklahoma game in 2021. He almost took over that game by himself. why not the prototypical X wide receiver over Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's it's not a pejorative to call him a slot wide receiver. He is a slot wide receiver.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I think he's fine in the slot. I don't know what. I'm not that. Quentin Johnston to me. No, Quentin Johnston to me either has like 4 top 10 finishes, or he does almost nothing. I really think there's almost no in between for this guy. I'm actually really curious because I think that him and Mike Williams are not that dissimilar. I know that Quentin Johnston can do some more things around the line of scrimmage. I'm not necessarily sure they're going to use him that way, especially if they still have Austin Eckler there, and I think there's almost a 0% chance that they will. But if they're going to use him similarly to Mike Williams, they might both just be busts for fantasy over the next couple of years. I'm not sure what one necessarily does that the other can't based on what they're currently running there.
I feel like Justin Herbert is going to make one of these guys, fantasy relevant. Maybe even a wide receiver 1 or high wide receiver 2. We talked about the wide receiver class. It was considered to be a weak wide receiver class, and then we get 4 taken in the first round. I don't know if it's the 4 that we would have considered 3 years ago, but regardless, we got 4. Matthew, you are on the clock in a dynasty superflex rookie draft. Who is the 101? Is it a quarterback? Is it Bijan Robinson? Bijan Robinson, it should be in consideration. Make the right decision and say his name. Go ahead, say it.
It's an easy decision for me. Assuming I earned the 1-1 and meaning my team is bad and I didn't just trade for this pick, I'm taking Anthony Richardson. You have to. I love Bijan, and I think he's going to be a Saquon Barkley-esque player in the NFL. I actually think he's a better runner than Saquon Barkley. Barkley was an incredible athlete, but I don't think he had the nuance and the skills behind the line of scrimmage that Bijan has. But if you earned that 1-1, if your team is just that bad, chances are Bijan Robinson coming in is not helping you win a championship this year. And I would imagine it's going to take you a year or 2 to get to that point, at which point Bijan's value is going to start decreasing. You take Anthony Richardson if he figures it out on a very good Colts team with good weapons, a good offensive line, and an incredible running back behind him, and a head coach in Shane Steichen, who we saw help develop Jalen Hurts and turn him into what he is now. Anthony Richardson is the one quarterback out of these next 2 classes that will challenge Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen for a top quarterback finish. So I think you have to. I've been his biggest supporter, so I don't know what you're getting on me for. I have been his biggest supporter. I love Anthony Richardson.
I have spent the last 2 years on the Campus2Canton airwaves touting Anthony Richardson, and I have been mocked and ridiculed by these 2 people, Austin Nace and Matt Bruning. And now Matt's like, Anthony Richardson 101. Austin, are we going to be unanimous here that Anthony Richardson should be the one in Dynasty Superflex rookie drafts, even though you teased me and made fun of me for the better part of 2 years?
Austin, don't be the hero I can't be. Don't do it.
I don't do the grumpy bit a lot on this show. But Matt's take there is the kind of take that makes me extremely grumpy. Because if you have the 101 and your team is truly that bad and you don't have any extra draft capital, like you just bottom the crap out of your team, then the real answer is what you should do with the 101 is you should stop playing Dynasty Fantasy Football because you're an idiot. You should never end up with the 101 and have no additional draft capital. If it's true, then you don't know what you're doing. You take Bijan Robinson, he's the best player there. Quite frankly, you can find other guys to work around him. He is the best, most immediate impact. Running backs are potentially even worth more than beyond the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in Dynasty. They're worth their weight in gold every single year. The true bell cow guys, because they're so rare. I think the roster or whatever dictates that if my team's so bad, if your team's that bad, then stop playing Dynasty. It's not for you. Go play best ball or something where there's a little bit of a different, setup going on.
In Superflex, running backs do not hold that kind of value. They do not.
Oh, they do.
I had so much hope for you, Austin. I thought you were going to do
didn't
the
want
right
to let
thing.
you down. But
I had so much hope for you. Anthony Richardson, 102 then? Say it. Who else could you pick? Come on now.
no comment.
You just no comment.
I'm gonna plead the fifth. I'm gonna invoke my constitutional right. I'm not gonna self-incriminate myself.
We are going to be here for the draft cast. Austin, any particular players that you are looking forward to being taken here in a few minutes when we get started on day 2?
Yeah, if we're talking offensive skill guys that are going to matter for us for fantasy, I still think Michael Mayer and where he ends up is really, really intriguing. He probably is this is not really what you want out of tight end prospect for fantasy, but probably has the best floor of any of the tight ends in this class. I think Kincaid, there's a chance that he's just nothing in the NFL, especially with that back injury. So Mayer is a guy I'm looking forward to. And then I just want to see where all these running backs land, because I think knowing some of the fantasy space, we're going to see some guy get drafted or get vaulted up draft boards that has no business being vaulted up draft boards based on some quote unquote premium landing spot here today. So I'm interested to see who that back is.
Yeah, it's the same for me. Michael Mayers is the main guy. I do want to see where some of these wide receivers go. We didn't see Josh Downs go. I was really hoping Buffalo, when they traded up in the first, was coming to get him, not Dalton Kincaid. I thought that was a massive mistake on Buffalo's part. The running backs, and then some of the tight ends. I mean, this tight end class has a chance to be very good for us in fantasy. I want to see where some of those guys go. Do we get, 3 or 4 tight ends coming off the board here in round 2 and 3?
Yeah, I don't think we can undersell how deep the draft class is. Michael Mayer wasn't selected. A lot of people thought that he would be taken on day 1. You've got Tucker Kraft, you got Luke Musgrave, you got Darnell Washington, who folks said was going to be a first-round draft. I remember Dane Brugler's first mock draft. He had 3 tight ends in the first round, and including Darnell Washington, who at one point we thought could move to left tackle. So the tight end class is really deep. I thought Joey Porter Jr., the 6'3", 190-pound, long-limbed, aggressive, physical press man corner, who probably doesn't move as fluidly as you'd want to for a corner, I thought nonetheless that his size would get him drafted in the first round. My Detroit Lions need some secondary help. I would really like to see them take Joey Porter Jr. I think that his name is going to get called here earlier. Cody Mock had a great Senior Bowl, road grader. Everyone likes him because, he went to North Dakota State, doesn't have any teeth. I would like to see him taken. And then, of course, there's Will Levis. Austin is Will Levis, his name is going to get called here early, don't you? I mean, right?
So here's the thing, like we were talking about with the first round. I think if he doesn't go the first couple picks of the second round, you can expect another slide with him. Because I think the most likely scenario if he goes early is a team has moved up a couple picks to grab him. And if we don't see that happen, then that means teams aren't really clamoring for his services.
When is Will Levis going to hear his name called, Matthew?
I don't know. I think there's a shot Hendon Hooker goes ahead of him, and I don't love saying that, but I think it's possible. I think they both slide. I think you're looking at back end of the second round. I don't think either one goes here in the next 10 picks.
Michael Mayer, Will Levis, the running back class, those are all things that we are going to be looking forward to as we get started here on day 2. Matthew, Austin, I'm disappointed in both of you. Matthew, you're lying about your support for Anthony Richardson. Austin, he should have been the number 1 overall pick. Stay tuned for the draft. Here we go.